Other interesting political news, you have Ford CEO Jim Farley, the analysis breakdown, and I greatly appreciate the comments. I was saying an off the cuff joke about him having a positive relation with Chris Farley. Hilariously enough, that is a legit relation. I had no idea, interestingly enough. And one of the reasons I love the comments, I always keep them open, with the exception of when YouTube overrides me when I ironically was talking about a video specifically about censorship. But it's because the more they're together, the more interesting the show gets. Now, in terms of breaking down Jim Farley's compensation for the past couple of years, and in terms of all these dollar amounts, we're talking about total compensation, which on average you're seeing, I would say relative to the total package, small in terms of the base salary. A majority is usually, when you're looking at executive compensation, it's usually stock as well as incentive-based stock. So if they hit certain performance marks, then they'll get more stock appropriately. Now, in terms of his total compensation breakdown for the most recent fiscal year, that'd be the 2022, and his total compensation package was $20 million, or rather, more accurately, $20,996,146. Interestingly enough, they didn't care about the pennies. How many pennies extra was that? And 3 cents? We may never know. But nevertheless, the breakdown of that actual total compensation package includes $1.7 million in salary. So that's just straight up cash money, as the youth might say. That's $15.2 million in stock, $2.8 million in incentive compensation, as well as a mixture between life insurance, death insurance, morbidly enough, and miscellaneous. So that's his total compensation. So again, talking about the UAW with their negotiations, they're asking $80 to $100 billion. That's their total compensation. I've looked at the different statistics on trying to get the average worker wage for UAW workers throughout the factories, throughout the United States. And I've tried 4 or 5 different websites, and I'm struggling to find a consistent number because there's so many variables. So trying to keep things apples to apples comparison, I'm comparing the total compensation packages of the executives as well as the total compensation ask of the UAW employees with the current contract negotiation. If you have a resource in the comments, let me know. I greatly appreciate it. I was looking at a couple of the sites, include salary.com, Glassdoor, and when I'm looking at the automotive, the UAW factory workers, in some cases, I'll get $1 per hour, which I could translate knowing the number of average hours that they work, but that doesn't tell me some of the benefits, and I'm trying to keep these numbers as equal in terms of apples to apples. So let me know in the comments. Again, more data, the better. So going back to historicals on his total compensation packages, 2022, his total compensation package was $20,996,146. In 2021, his total compensation package was $22,813,000. Sorry. 2020, the total compensation was $11,802,054. Now, in 2019, he was not the CEO, he was the president. So I actually eluded those numbers, or I actually left them out. I believe it was well, of course, going from president to CEO, the number of compensation would be a fraction. Now, according to Reuters, Ford currently has 57,000 UAW members working for them. And in total, in terms of all employees that Ford has, they have 173,000 employees. Now, taking Jim Farley's most current recent compensation package, and another thing I find fascinating, would the UAW actually take a pay cut year to year? You see the CEOs. So right now, if you're watching the whole episode, we've thus went over the analysis of Mary Barra's compensation packages throughout the past 4 years, and she's the CEO of General Motors. And she, like Jim, actually took a pay cut going from actually it was the same time period as well, going from 2021 to 2022. Yeah, they both actually took pay cuts. Now, is that something the UAW, and you're part of the member, let me know in the comments. I can't help but think that's something they would never, ever, 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 ever tolerate. And don't get me wrong, I understand they did take a pay cut in 2009 when they were part of the bankruptcy with both General Motors as well as Ford and General Motors and Chrysler, nearly Ford. Ford made it out by the skin of their teeth, so to say. But nevertheless, getting back to the numbers, you have Ford having 57,000 UAW members and 173,000 total employees. So Jim Farley's total compensation package of $2,996,146, let's say he got paid nothing and decided to perversely redistribute his wealth to everyone. Now, that means each UAW member at Ford would get $368.35, which is enough to buy a video game box, I believe. Or what else could you buy? A couple tanks of gas. That's almost enough for a case of ammo for 223, which, again, inflation, that's rough. That's not so good. Although, ironically enough, the UAW actually helps politicians get into power who cause, or are a big contributing factor of printing more money that's ever been printed before and causing 40-year hyperinflation. As well as actually causing their demise in terms of going to EVs. That's because the government is bullying these companies, and EVs will require inherently less number of people to make because they're basically computers on wheels. So ironically, they're actually voting and partially contributing to their own demise. Ironic. Nevertheless, going back to the total compensation again, so let's say we're done divided by all Ford employees. So you have Jim Farley's, again, total compensation package of $20,996,146 divided by 173,000 employees. That means each Ford employee we get $121.37, which I suppose is enough for a tank of gas or an apple after the federal government and local sales taxes are taken away. Again, vote accordingly. Now, looking at Ford in terms of the latest statistics on the stocks and the profits, Ford's last fiscal year, they did profit $25 billion. It's $25 billion. Now, the UAW wants between $80 and $100 billion. Now, that is over the course of a 4-year contract. So, $100 billion divided by 4 years, Ford would make nothing, because that would be all the profits. And I said this as a joke. I said this as a joke a couple of weeks ago that they wanted all the profits. Statistically speaking, it looks like from those proposals they kind of do. And again, these proposals are also changing on an hourly basis as the negotiations go on, and we'll see where the numbers fall. But yeah, that's quite a big chunk of change. Now, in terms of the UAW and how much they make in terms of their leadership, Shawn Fain is their current president. Now, last year he was a administration assistant. Now, as an administrative assistant, you probably think you get what, maybe $40,000, $50,000 a year being an assistant. Nope, he got $160,000, $130. Wow, that is quite a big chunk of change, and I believe that is total compensation in terms of base salary, health insurance, all the types of bells and whistles that they receive. Now, in terms of last year's or the prior UAW president Raymond Curry, he got $267,126. Dear God, $267,126? That is quite a big chunk of change for being a divorce attorney. I mean, president of the United Auto Workers, whose goal is surely to unify the workers and the big three. I'm kidding, because usually their job is the antithesis. They actually profit, and they basically pretend to justify their existence by generating conflict between the two parties and getting a big chunk of change while they do so. Now, when you're talking about compensation of executives, I think a more appropriate, again, comparing a wage increase percentage of the average employee to the CEO, is apples to oranges. Or in this case, perhaps a Ford Mustang to a Geo Metro, which surely does age me in terms of the reference to the automobile I referenced. I'll let you use the search engine yourself to see the comical thing that was the Geo Metro. But nevertheless, it's not really apples to apples, as the garden section might suggest, or the fruit produce section might appreciate as a metaphor. Because again, a 40% increase in the executive's salary would cost a company maybe a couple $120 million over the course of a 4-year contract. So what's bigger? $124 million, that's not really that big of an impact on business. 80 to 100 billion, that's a huge impact on the business and a huge impact on the price of the vehicle that's going to be passed down to the consumer for the 19 people who still want these vehicles. So needless to say, that's going to have a dramatically different impact on the business. Now, I think a more appropriate way in terms of if you want to say a CEO is overpaid or underpaid, well, first of all, they're paid appropriately because that's what the shareholders have voted on. That's what they all agree on, and they own the company. But nevertheless, let's say you are a shareholder and you want to give your educated opinion and you want to vote, as anyone can buy stock these days, that's a beautiful thing. Now, I think a more appropriate objective and a more appropriate measurement would be the company's profitability, their new products, investments, as well as their stock. Stock is one of the biggest metrics for publicly traded companies and how they're doing. So let's break down the Ford stock over the past 5 years. Now, Ford stock, again, over the past 5 years, their stock is up 34.38%. Let me let that pin drop for a second here. It'll soon be in the budget. Perhaps I'll splurge and buy some pins soon once the channel is monetized. Maybe. We might treat ourselves something like that. Pin drop. 34.38%. That's huge for a Detroit-based automotive company. Now, if anything, my 3 cents, he deserves a raise. He helps the stock go up by 34.38% with his business decisions and his leadership. Now, contrast that to General Motors. Now, General Motors, going back to Mary, who, again, the current CEO is Mary Barra. And again, these CEOs have both been CEOs. Mary has been CEO longer at the company in terms of longer at GM. Jim Farley's been CEO since 2020. Again, he was president in 2019. But it's almost the whole 5-year duration of that stock trend. So, you have Ford. Their stock's going up by that's so unusual for Detroit companies to have that big of a delta. That's really good. I still almost don't believe myself. Now, going to General Motors. Again, both stocks over the same 5-year period. GM, their stock went up by nothing. It actually lost stock value. It went down by 3.24%. Yeah, that's not so good. So, yeah, Ford is doing pretty darn good for that stock. Then, also another great thing about Ford is, again, I don't have a fiducial responsibility. I'm not telling you to buy stock. I don't give financial advice. I'm just trying to break down the compensation packages relative to the performance of the companies. Now, with Ford, they also importantly pay dividends, which is something that is, I would say, tantamount to most publicly traded companies. They're all groups of investors who buy companies on that basis alone. Many people will argue it also shows the stability of the business. It's rewarding the people who are investing in it. Well, Ford not only pays a dividend, but their dividend yield is 4.83% versus GM coming in at 1.1%. Now, Ford stock per share is lower than General Motors. Ford stock is around, again, it fluctuates on a minute basis, but this week it's about $12.58 per share compared to General Motors that's coming in at $33.06 per share. So I can't help but think, with all that information, my 3 cents is Jim Farley's underpaid, if anything. But again, that's my 3 cents. It used to be 2 cents, but 40-year hyperinflation, ironically, partially caused by the people the UAW get into politics, I gotta do 3 cents for my opinion. Though it is still free to click that subscribe button. And let me know if you're an employee of Ford or if you work at the UAW for Ford factory, do you think he's underpaid or do you think he's overpaid? And if you do think he's overpaid, would you rather him get a lower stock compensation package? Or I guess my question is also, what do you think you don't like about the compensation package? Do you think they shouldn't get stock? Do you think they should have a lower base salary and more stock? Historically, one of the most famous examples of that being Elon Musk, who took, I think, like $1 salary for many years, and he risked everything by just taking stock, which helped make him the wealthiest man in the world. So let me know in the comments, not only do you think is he overpaid or underpaid, but what would you change about the structure of his compensation package? I appreciate your input and look forward to what you have to say.